Welcome back to the Veil Echo, where we uncover the darkest corners of human nature and the crimes that left scars across history. Tonight, we travel back to the late 1970s, a time when California's sunlit streets hid something unspeakable, a story so horrifying it would forever reshape American law. It began in the heart of Los Angeles, under a warm orange sky where the world still felt innocent. But beneath the calm, two men were about to forge a bond that would shatter lives. Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, strangers turned allies inside cold prison walls. In the prison yard, they weren't just serving time, they were crafting a nightmare. Over shared words and dark fantasies, a pact was made, sealed with twisted smiles and silent understanding. When they walked free, they carried that darkness with them. They bought an old, beaten-up van, plain white, unassuming yet destined to become a moving chamber of horrors. On lonely California highways they hunted, their eyes scanning for those who trusted too easily, young women hitchhiking beneath the golden sun, unaware that the van slowing beside them carried monsters. Inside, the air was thick, the walls padded with fear. A toolbox sat beneath the seats, its metal gleaming coldly under dim light, but this wasn't a mechanic's kit. Each tool inside had a new, horrifying purpose. The sound of the lid opening became the prelude to terror, the chilling echo of the evil pact they'd made years before. The road stretched endlessly through dusty canyons and into the darkness of the desert nights. Their screams faded into silence, swallowed by the vast emptiness. The killers believed they were invisible, hidden behind the quiet beauty of California's wilderness. But evil always leaves a trace. In the weeks that followed, police began to piece together the puzzle: reports of missing girls, strange tire tracks, and whispered rumors of a white van. Detectives sat in smoke-filled rooms, staring at maps covered in red pins, tracing patterns no one wanted to believe. The walls of the investigation room became a grim mosaic of faces, each one a reminder of how the pact between two men had spiraled into something monstrous. By the time the police found the van, the air around it seemed to hold the weight of every scream that had ever echoed within. The evidence they uncovered was so gruesome, it would haunt even the most seasoned investigators. And so began the case that would tear apart the illusion of safety across America, a story not just of cruelty, but of how darkness can thrive when no one dares to look too closely. This was just the beginning, the birth of a terror that would soon shake the nation to its core. Coming up next, the van's true purpose is revealed, and the nightmare unfolds inside its metal walls. The white van sat quietly beneath the dying sun, its surface reflecting a warm glow that masked the coldness within. To anyone passing by, it was nothing unusual, a simple vehicle parked near a desert road. But inside, it was the stage for horror, the place where innocence was stolen and nightmares were born. As night fell, the van rolled along empty highways, the engine's hum blending with the soft rhythm of the desert wind. Lawrence Bittaker drove with an eerie calm, his eyes fixed ahead, while Roy Norris sat beside him, watching the horizon fade into black. Every mile they covered wasn't just distance, it was descent. A descent into something unthinkable. They spotted her, a young girl no older than 17, standing on the side of the road with her thumb out, trusting the world like any other traveler of the time. The van slowed, its headlights cutting through the dusk, a beam of false safety. She smiled, grateful for a ride. The door slid open, she stepped in, and just like that the van swallowed another soul. Inside, the air grew heavy. The hum of the tires was joined by the metallic rattle of the toolbox beneath the seat. When the lid opened, its hinges creaked like a whisper from the underworld. Inside lay pliers, screwdrivers, hammers, ordinary tools twisted into weapons of control and pain. The once harmless sound of metal became the soundtrack of terror. The killers worked in silence, each movement deliberate, each action colder than the last. The desert outside stood witness, vast and merciless, its sands swallowing the cries that no one would ever hear. The moon watched from above, casting pale light through the van's small windows, light that revealed the true face of human evil. Days turned into nights and nights into endless drives through the California canyons. Victims vanished, one after another, their disappearances stitched together by the same white van and the same chilling pattern. The police were baffled, chasing whispers and tire tracks, searching for a predator that moved like a ghost. Back in the van, Bittaker and Norris grew bolder. They recorded their cruelty, reliving their crimes as if they were collectors of suffering. The toolbox, once a symbol of creation, had become their altar of destruction. But evil doesn't stay hidden forever. Evidence began to surface. A discarded photograph here, a broken chain there. Detectives started connecting the dots, their eyes narrowing as the map filled with names, young women who never made it home. And then came the break, a witness, a friend who heard too much, who saw the monsters behind the masks. The walls of their secret world began to crack. As the van sat one final time under the harsh glare of police lights, the nightmare it carried was finally exposed. The once quiet vehicle, now surrounded by officers, became a symbol, not just of what two men had done, but of what society could never again ignore. The van had become a coffin of truth, and from its twisted metal shell, justice was about to rise. Next, the courtroom, the chaos, and the law forever changed by the horrors inside that van. The silence inside the courtroom was suffocating. Rows of families sat clutching old photographs, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The air buzzed with a mix of sorrow and rage as the trial of Bittaker and Roy Norris began, the final chapter of a horror that had gripped America. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, but for the victims' loved ones, time stood still. The prosecutors laid out the evidence piece by piece. The white van, once an unremarkable vehicle, now loomed as the centerpiece of evil. Photographs of its blood-stained walls flashed across the courtroom screen. The toolbox sat sealed inside a clear glass case, its metallic gleam a silent witness to the suffering it once held. Every hammer, every wrench, every screw spoke a truth that words could never capture. Detectives testified, recalling the moment they pried open the van's doors, the smell of death, the heavy silence, and the overwhelming realization that they were standing inside a crime scene unlike any other. One by one, the jurors listened, pale and trembling, as recordings and confessions were played. The details were so disturbing that some had to step out, unable to endure another second. And yet, through the horror, something began to shift. The nation was watching. People demanded answers. How could two men roam free for so long? How could the system fail to see the signs? Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered holding signs that read, "Never again." Their voices rose together, echoing across the steps of justice. When the verdict was read, the sound of the gavel hitting wood echoed like thunder. Guilty, on every count. For many, it wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was the beginning of something greater, a reckoning. The Toolbox Killers would never walk free again, but their crimes would leave behind a legacy of reform. Lawmakers across the country began reviewing sentencing laws, parole procedures, and investigative methods. The brutality of this case forced America to confront the cracks in its justice system. Tougher laws were drafted, victims' rights expanded, and the notion of life without parole took on a new, permanent meaning. Justice wasn't just served, it was reforged piece by piece in the aftermath of unimaginable cruelty. Years passed, but the shadows of the case lingered. Old evidence boxes sat in police archives, labeled and dust-covered, grim reminders of what humanity is capable of when darkness goes unchecked. Journalists revisited the story, documentaries were filmed, and survivors spoke not just of pain but of resilience. Candlelight vigils were held for the victims, their faces illuminated softly in the night, no longer forgotten, no longer silent. The country that once recoiled in horror now stood united in remembrance and in resolve. The Toolbox Killers' reign of terror ended long ago, but the laws born from their crimes continue to protect lives to this day. Justice, once broken, was reforged in steel, unyielding, unwavering, and everlasting. Because even in the face of the darkest evil, humanity must rise and remember. Some monsters are caught, but their lessons must never be forgotten.